ago in order to be able to understand all the damn electronics that goes through this stuff.
Right.
Chemistry and biology is very logical to me, but not electronics. Sorry.
Is very consistent. I feel the same way in relation to the conversation of nutrition and such, which kind of stems into chemistry actually. But
Exactly.
I feel like there's a new fad of how we're supposed to eat and what we're supposed to do each like 3 to 5 years, it seems.
Absolutely impossible to keep track.
Yeah. What is your diet like? By the way, just so you know, I just pressed record. So
okay, good.
I don't have any kind of I don't do an intro. I do all the intros separate and all the things. So this is just a conversation.
Great.
That's it.
I mean, my diet, I've learned really about my diet. That is, what kind of a diet to adapt. Mainly, believe it or not, because of the research that I've done in the field of nitric oxide, and also the contributions made by so many spectacular scientists, working in the field of nitric oxide. And I can explain that later, but my diet is very simple, Aaron. I don't believe in, high protein, high fat, keto, carbs. I believe in a well-balanced diet. In other words, roughly 30% of your diet from fat, 30% from protein, 40%, I guess, from carbohydrate. But in every category, there's healthy and unhealthy, right? Healthy, unhealthy fat, healthy and unhealthy protein. Same thing goes with carbs. So I try to keep balanced nutrition, focusing on all of the major food groups. I don't think our mammalian bodies have been designed to focus more so with one, kind of food group than another. And there have been many publications, hundreds, and people swear by their diets. And I'm not going to put them down. They may work for them for some period of time, but I like a well-balanced diet, but fueled with as much physical activity as I can put into the system. And of course, you understand that very well.
Yeah. I wonder, so how long have you been conducting science? Or is it, your background is pharmacology? Can you get a little bit into your background originally?
Yeah. I've always had, even when I was in high school, pre-high school, I had, unlike my friends who were interested in girls and bicycles, I had an interest in chemistry and biology. So, I'm the guy who had a chemistry set and made firecrackers and rocket fuel. I used microscopes to examine cells from plants and animals. I mean, I did this from early on. I had a passion for it. I stuck with it. My area of greatest interest was the cardiovascular system, the heart and the blood vessels. And so I just took this stepwise all the way through my undergraduate college education, which was I majored in chemistry. And then I went on to graduate school and medical school. And in my graduate school, I majored in pharmacology, which is the study of the actions of drugs on the body. So by definition, that demands an understanding of chemistry and biology. I was in medical school for about 2 years and doing very well. In fact, I got better grades in my medical school courses than graduate school. But then after 2 years, I decided to bow out of medical school, not get my MD, because I didn't want to practice medicine. And this happened because toward the end of my second year, I had to go to the emergency wards. And let me tell you, I couldn't handle patients coming in from automobile accidents, motorcycle accidents, bleeding, with bones exposed. I said to myself, that's it, buddy. That's not for me. So I bowed out of that, and I continued in doing basic research. But I learned a lot from those medical school courses because of that, I was always able to focus my work on research that's important, for health and disease.
There's something, for some reason, there's something scratching on your end. I wonder if there's, as you were talking in the last one, it didn't happen in the beginning. I wonder, is that
but it doesn't. Okay.
It doesn't look like the voice. Maybe.
You know what happens, Aaron? Being of Italian origin, I have a terrible tendency of moving around. My legs, my arms.
You
So
gesticulate.
I'm going to keep perfectly still, and you
Statuesque.
won't hear any more of
No,
that.
I don't know what it was because I was trying to look at the little mic thing and it wasn't touching
Yeah.
anything. But
No,
now it's gone, so maybe that was it.
it's my arms and legs against the chair and so on. It's
Oh, could that have been it? I don't. All right, that could be it. Well, so I wanted I mean, I'd like to talk a lot about a lot of things. I'd like to just talk about you as a
of
person,
course,
the human
yes,
being, and then I also would like to get into the research of nitric oxide,
yeah,
which is something that I've been kind of spouting out different details of, the value of breathing in certain ways being of value
yes,
to be able to upregulate this, and the help for your cardiovascular function and cognitive function and all these things. But I don't
sure.
really know what the hell I'm talking about. And so I'm very excited to get I'm very excited to get to have you be like, is this like what is NO2 and why does it matter in the first place?
you know, I've been accused also of not knowing what I'm talking about, but
Great.
but I get away with it because I have a Nobel
With a
Prize,
Nobel
and I
Prize,
remind
right.
people of that, and then they
Yeah.
keep quiet. You
Yeah,
know, but
exactly. Perfect.
well, so you want me to talk about nitric oxide? Is that
Yeah, please. Yeah,
sure?
I'm just for like layman folks, like
Yes,
who the hell cares? What's the difference
yeah,
between
I
that and
know. I
anything else? Why would
it's
we
it's
talk about it?
it's so important, and I'm not sure why nitric oxide hasn't made it out in the world like other discoveries have. And it's difficult for a scientific discovery to make it out there unless it pertains to everyday life, to human well-being, and also the news media has something to do with it. Nitric oxide started to become fairly well known to people when Viagra was marketed. In other words, the early work we did on nitric oxide was strictly cardiovascular function. So let me explain that first. Nitric oxide is actually a gas. It's a pollutant in the air, and it is formed when a bolt of lightning zaps through the air and causes a chemical reaction between nitrogen and oxygen. And that's N and O, and it forms NO, which is the chemical symbol for nitric oxide. So nobody thought that nitric oxide would be made by the body or important in the body until we discovered a number of years ago that the body does produce nitric oxide. That was an original discovery, and that essentially is what landed me a nice trip to Stockholm, Sweden.
Mm.
And what we showed with nitric oxide is that nitric oxide is made by many cells in the bodies, but mainly by the arteries. And the function of nitric oxide made in the body by the arteries is to control the blood pressure, to lower the pressure. In other words, prevent hypertension. Another effect of NO is to prevent inflammation of the arteries. That means it's going to prevent coronary artery disease and heart attack. And finally, we showed that nitric oxide can prevent the unwanted clotting of blood. I mean, you want the blood to clot when you have an injury, right? So the blood can clot and you don't have a lot of blood loss through the cut or abrasion. But you don't want the blood to clot when it's circulating through the brain or circulating through the heart. If that happens, you have a stroke, right, in the brain, and a heart attack if the blood clots in the heart. So we discovered that nitric oxide prevents blood clotting. And that led many, many other investigators to show that one of the major roles of our nitric oxide is to prevent stroke, prevent heart attack, and prevent high blood pressure. In other words, it's the most important molecule in the body to provide cardiovascular health. And so many drugs there's an attempt to develop many drugs to boost nitric oxide in order to prevent cardiovascular disease.
Like a
And
statin, right?
yeah, well, statin,
In a way.
absolutely. A statin is one of them. And it's been very difficult in that field because of the chemistry of nitric oxide. It's very unstable. It's a gaseous substance, by the way. You can't put it in a pill or a capsule or a liquid. It's a gas, and it only lasts for a few seconds once your body makes it. And so, but investigators, including us, but mainly others, found that you can boost your nitric oxide by taking lots of antioxidants, foods, berries, any colorful fruits or vegetables that provide antioxidants have been shown categorically to boost your nitric oxide. That's one reason why it's very healthy to eat those kinds of fruits and vegetables, because they are loaded with antioxidants. Naturally, plants make antioxidants to prevent the UV light from the sun from killing the plants. They make the antioxidants to protect themselves against the UV light. And we, all mammals, eat fruits and vegetables to bring in the antioxidants to boost our nitric oxide to keep us healthy. And, very few people know this. There's not been enough books written. So I decided, I'm not doing any research anymore. So I'm actually working on 3 different books at the same time to try to make nitric oxide a household word. And, Aaron, every 8-year-old knows what Viagra is. And very few adults know what nitric oxide is.
Yeah.
That makes me upset. But the interesting thing is that Viagra works by boosting nitric oxide in the erectile tissue, in the penis, in the male, and in the clitoris, in the female. They have erectile tissue as well. So that's how Viagra works, by increasing nitric oxide, which increases blood flow, right? You get engorgement of the corpus cavernosum or erectile tissue with blood. And that's what erectile function is. And that's mediated by nitric oxide. Very few people know that.
Yeah. And so are we endogenously, or when we're making it within our own bodies, there's cells wrapping through the endothelial tissue and all of our
Yes.
blood
Yes.
vessels, arteries, all that are producing NO2 right. as we breathe. It's just blood's passing, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, it's the NO is made by the endothelial cells, which are a single layer of cells that line all the blood vessels in the body. We have roughly 100,000 miles of arteries, veins, and capillaries, and every one of those is lined on the inside. In other words, between the blood and the other part of the arteries or veins. That single lining is called the endothelium, and those cells make nitric oxide. We have about roughly a trillion endothelial cells. Each one should be making nitric oxide all the time. And I just wanted to, make one correction, Aaron.
Yeah, please.
So when we talk about nitric oxide, it's one atom of nitrogen connected to one atom of oxygen. So it's NO.
Oh, I was saying NO2.
Yeah. No, NO2 is dangerous.
That's different. Yeah, that's
NO2,
did I say that? I apologize.
Yeah. No. NO2 is nitrogen dioxide.
Right.
And that's the brown gas you see in the polluted air over LA, New York, Chicago, or whatever. The NO2 is extremely dangerous and extremely fatal, whereas NO has totally different properties, even though the chemistry looks to be similar.
Yeah, I've been watching too many documentaries on regenerative farming and carbon sequestration.
Right.
So how does breathing impact the production of NO in our bodies? Is it something that we can augment just through the manner in which we live outside of actually food consumption?
Yes, that's a very, very good point. And, that's only a recent finding. Breathing, let's say breathing through your nose, meaning inhaling, let's say inhaling through your nose, that's been thought of, for hundreds, maybe thousands of years as being important, especially by yogis, people who practice yoga. And they have different ways of exhaling through the nose, through the mouth, slowly through the mouth. But it's only about 15 or 18 years ago that the physiological significance of that was discovered. not by me, but by others, some of my good friends in Sweden. What they discovered is that the nasal cavities, the nasal sinusoids, make a very large amount of nitric oxide continuously, continuously. And that nitric oxide gas gets into the nasal area. And when you breathe in through your nose, you're going to deliver, you're going to carry that nitric oxide into your lungs. Remember, nitric oxide is a gas. And there's lots of it that goes into your lungs. Your mouth does not produce nitric oxide. So if you breathe strictly through your mouth, you're not getting nitric oxide in the lungs. So one of the benefits of inhaling through the nose is to bring in that nitric oxide. There's lots of advantages of breathing in through the nose. You've pointed that out in your books and talks and so on. I mean, we have filters and cilia. We have all kinds of things in the nose that actually clean the air a bit before it gets into the lungs. It also warms up the air, which makes it better for oxygen exchange deep in the lungs. But the way I look at it, the most important attribute of breathing in through the nose is taking in that nitric oxide into the nose. And let me explain why. It's so simple. You know, you don't have to be a physiologist or a scientist to understand it. You just have to know what nitric oxide does. And I've already explained one of them to you. When nitric oxide goes in the lungs, it dilates or widens the pulmonary arteries, so more blood flows through. Why do you want blood to flow through your lungs? You want it to pick up oxygen. The oxygen is in the air. That has to get in the lungs. Nitric oxide also widens or relaxes your airways, like your trachea, and then the bronchioles inside the lungs. They get wider. More air comes in, makes it easier to take in air. Air has oxygen. So if you increase blood flow and you increase oxygen, you're greatly increasing the oxygenation of the blood, so that when the oxygenated blood leaves the lungs, it goes to the rest of your body. And believe me, if you're an athlete like you are and you work out, and I'm a quasi-athlete, but I need more oxygen than you do, I think, you appreciate, breathing through the nose, getting that nitric oxide in.
Yeah.
And there's one more effect that nitric oxide has, which is so important to talk about nowadays during this coronavirus pandemic. Nitric oxide for many years has been known to be able to produce anti-microbial effects. In other words, nitric oxide can kill bacteria, parasites, and viruses. And there have been studies to show that nitric oxide especially kills the coronavirus.
Mm.
So, and in fact, as we speak, Aaron, as we speak, there are 5 large clinical trials in progress in which patients with severe COVID-19 are being given nitric oxide gas by inhalation through special masks.
Mm.
And the early data show that this is an incredibly effective treatment of COVID-19. The first study was completed, I think, about 2 weeks ago, where a couple of dozen pregnant women with serious COVID-19 were admitted to the ICU, immediately put on nitric oxide gas by inhalation. They're all doing well. Half of them gave birth in the hospital to healthy babies. The other half gave birth after they got home. All healthy. Everybody's healthy. Everybody's happy. So that was because of the inhaled nitric oxide. So I'm hoping that the other clinical trials, which are ongoing with even more serious COVID-19 patients, proves to be correct. So you see, what kills these patients, Aaron, is that there's inflammation of those endothelial cells we talked about. Tremendous inflammation. That means that the nitric oxide production in the lungs stops. Now, what happens if you don't make NO? You can't get vasodilation. You get vasoconstriction. You get no blood flow to the lungs.
Huh.
Your airways constrict and you get little oxygen. And most importantly, if you don't have any NO in the lungs to kill the coronavirus, you die. And that's exactly what kills these patients. They die of a massive thrombosis or blood clotting in the lungs because there's no nitric oxide there to prevent the blood clotting.
That's a really powerful message. I wonder within that, I want to go deeper into that, and then I also want to hone in a little bit within the breathing patterns, but I want to jump back to the virology part of it, the impact on the immune system and such. Um,
Sure.
when you're breathing through the nose, or say holding your breath, for example, or doing longer exhalations, longer inhalations,
Yeah.
is it about the terrain in which the air is passing through the nasal turbinates and such, or is it more of like the global impact of that respiratory pattern causing your nervous system to calm down and your diaphragmatic muscles to come online, or is it a combination of that?
Yeah, it's combination. I mean, everything you just said is true, and we know about that, and that's why breathing through the nose is important. But in addition to that, we have these hundreds of thousands of cells in the nasal mucosa that are continuously producing nitric oxide. They're just continuously producing it.
Mm.
I don't know of a way to increase or decrease it. They just continually make it. And so why not take advantage of that, especially now during this pandemic,
Yeah.
that whenever you inhale through your nose. I mean, maybe by bringing in nitric oxide all the time through the nose, who knows, you may actually prevent your lungs, from getting an infection.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's not been tested. It's very hard to test, but science is a bunch of proven facts. So we know the facts, and then we act on the facts. You don't need to have a clinical trial to make all this make sense.
Yeah.
And so it will be a good practice to breathe in through the nose for nitric oxide, as it is for all the other benefits that you're an expert in. I mean, it all helps and works together.
Yeah. What would the impact, not to get excessively contentious, but just what would the impact of, say, a person that was wearing a like an N95 mask for like a high percentage of the day?
Okay.
How would that impact
Yes, let me
NO,
explain.
all the things? Yeah.
I've talked to several anesthesiologists and a couple of surgeons, but more importantly, internal medicine experts who've been doing some tests recently. But they always remind me. They say, Lou, I'm a surgeon. I'm an anesthesiologist. I wear an N95 mask or better 10, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and I've been doing it for 30 years, and I'm very healthy. So, I mean, they wear masks all the time.
Yeah.
So a mask will protect you absolutely against this damn virus, because the virus sits on water droplets. It doesn't just fly in the air. I mean, it sits on residues on water, and that's all trapped by the mask. The pores of the mask are huge in comparison to the size of the molecules of oxygen or CO2. So when you breathe in, that oxygen comes right through the mask. There's no filter that can be made in this current state of knowledge to block out molecules of oxygen or CO2 or nitric oxide. I mean, the filters just block out much larger particles, if you know what I mean. They can't block out the small particles. Now, sometimes if you're exercising or whatever you might be doing and you breathe heavily in and out with a mask, you notice that the mask sometimes collapses onto your nose. But it's not going to decrease the overall delivery or overall volume of air that's going into your nose. It's just that you're doing it so quickly, you're drawing the air more quickly and forcefully through the pores of the mask, and that tends to collapse the mask a little bit. And, you know, I've been asked to talk about this many times, Aaron, and all I can tell you is this. You know, we need to listen to science. You know, scientific fact, you know, speak the truth. I mean, if the science is factual, you know, it's really hard to have an opinion on that because by definition, you know, a fact is not amenable or subject to a matter of opinion, right? A theory might be, but a scientific fact is you can't draw an opinion on that. So I try to tell people, it no matter what you believe, it doesn't hurt. You have nothing to lose by wearing a mask during these pandemic days. You know, wearing a mask and staying a number of feet apart will help tremendously in you know, stopping the spread of the virus. There's no question about that, and it's not going to hurt you. Ask any nurse, ask any anesthesiologist or surgeon who spends literally 80% of their living days with a mask on, you know,
Yeah.
working.
Yeah. The so the adding the NO intranasally, breathing in, like getting a mask and breathing that in, would that just be kind of bringing a body back up to a baseline had they been following all the basic guidelines of living a healthy lifestyle, or is there kind of like some super saturation of NO that's of benefit going beyond what you would if you were just breathing well, eating well, being outside, doing all the things?
Well, it's the experiments, you know, this is relatively new and trials, studies have not been done in that detail, but measurements have been made as to what the concentration or level is of the nitric oxide that is produced by the nasal cavities. In other words, what level of nitric oxide, how many molecules of nitric oxide are made per minute in the nasal cavities? And that's how many will get into your lungs. And we know from various kinds of experiments in animals, in vitro, we know the concentrations of nitric oxide required to produce these beneficial effects. And so on average, just by normal breathing, normal inhaling through the nose, every time you inhale, you know, just keep your mouth closed if you have to. Just breathe in through your nose. You can breathe out through your nose too, no big deal. But breathe in through the nose. You will be taking in, at the end of the day, more nitric oxide than you would need to fight off, a coronavirus infection.
Mm.
But you got to do it constantly. Believe it or not, now it's hard to control the concentration of NO in your nose. If you have a nasal cold, if you have inflammation of these sinuses in the nose, they will produce less NO. That's true. But also, when these special devices are used to give nitric oxide to these sick patients, the nitric oxide is a gas, comes in a tank, next to a tank with oxygen. The oxygen and the nitric oxide are delivered to this special contraption, this device that is by your nose. It's mixed rapidly, and then, it goes into your lungs. And if you're unconscious, of course, they put tubes into your nose. Yep. To go into your lungs. The concentration of the nitric oxide that is given to patients with COVID-19, it's the same concentration, Aaron, as the nitric oxide your nose makes. That is the critically important thing when I'm urging my scientific friends to get that published and put that in the damn newspapers.
Yeah.
And the first thing they should do is send it to President Trump.
Yeah. When you were talking, you knocked your speaker thing down. Can you raise it up a little bit? Just a little
We
bit.
go.
There we go.
Okay,
We're back in.
we're back in.
We're back in. What inspired you to get into all of this stuff? I think you're the first person that I've talked to on here that won a Nobel Prize, and what a great thing to hang your hat on. Well,
Yes,
how
yes.
was that
Well,
stuff? Was
I
that a moment where you're like, oh, I look like a mafioso, like I'm a made man, or what was
well,
that experience like?
I often do hang my hat on the Nobel Prize because you see, I don't have enough hair to hang my hat on my head, so the Nobel Prize comes in handy.
That's great.
Uh, that I couldn't begin to tell you how I felt after that announcement was made. You know, I've been doing a good job all my career, and maybe for about 10 or 15 years prior to that date, I had many of my colleagues coming up to me and saying, you know, Lou, one of these days you're going to get the Nobel Prize. And I would always tell them to please shut up. I don't need that kind of pressure. Don't
Yeah.
tell me about any Nobel Prize. I'm not working to get a Nobel Prize. I'm working for the benefit of humankind. If things work out and they want to give me a prize, don't worry. I'll make a plane reservation and go to Stockholm and get it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that's my attitude. But although I had some idea I would get it, I have to tell you that when the announcement was made, I mean, I lost it.
Okay.
I've still lost it. It's been 22 years, and you know, I'm flying like a kite. I mean, I'm very proud of it, to be honest with you, because I worked my tail off, you know, doing my work, and you know, and I think that in addition to Viagra, I've made some important contributions to medicine, and I do feel good about it. And so I have to say that every few days I walk into my living room. My wife and I called it the Nobel room. And, you know, I kind of pick up the Nobel Prize and handle it for a while. And then
What
I
is
put
it?
it down.
What is it about that feels so good to you? I remember. I think of Richard Feynman. I think he was like resistant towards receiving. Maybe I don't know if did he get a Nobel Prize. I think he was kind of like poo pooing on it, like I don't need any kind of
Yeah,
trophies or
well,
whatever.
many people, you know, have said that. It's not the fact that it's a trinket or whatever.
Yeah.
What it is what it is that uh, it's world, global, peer recognition of your contributions to science and humankind.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, arguably, I think that's the top prize a scientist can get. You know, the first one was awarded in 1901. So what does that make it? Almost 120 years
119
ago.
years. Yeah.
And since then, and we have six categories, right? We've got chemistry, physics, medicine, but then we have literature, economics, and peace. When you add up all the Nobel Prizes, there's only been about 950 since 1901. And in medicine, there's only been 220
Hmm.
since 1901, and I'm one of them. And you know, I mean that feels good.
Did you, before that, was there any sensation of feeling like unheard or feeling like unappreciated or anything like that? Or was it?
Yes, yeah, of course. That does happen. I have to tell you that after making all of these important discoveries,
Yeah.
I figured in my mind, you know, I wouldn't discuss it with anybody. I figured in my mind, you know, look what I did. I discovered nitric oxide. I discovered it does this, it does that. I discovered that it's the main neurotransmitter in the nerves that go to the erectile tissue. I discovered nitric oxide was that neurotransmitter. That's what allowed big pharma like Pfizer
Yeah.
to capitalize on that and develop Viagra. So when that was all done, you know, I figured, fantastic. You know, what more is there? What more can I do? And Viagra was marketed in. Finally, Viagra came along in 1998. Okay, so before that, though, there was word that this drug was going to come out, plus all the other contributions I made were well before that. And so I was kind of wondering, I thought maybe I won't get the Nobel Prize. And that did start to bother me a little bit, although I wouldn't share that with my friends. But then I have to tell you this, though. This is hilarious. And you can look all this up if you don't believe me.
Yeah.
But in March of 98, there was this big news announcement and all the news stations, sudden news, news alert that Viagra, which was a new term, nobody knew what it was. Viagra was marketed to treat erectile dysfunction. And so I looked at it, I immediately, looked it up and saw that it worked by increasing nitric oxide. And I went crazy. And I said, if that doesn't land me the prize, then I'm not going to get it. And interestingly, 6 months later, in October of 98, the Nobel Prize for nitric oxide was announced. And I got it 6 months later. So I thought, is this a coincidence or what? So I decided to look up the committee members, the Nobel committee members for medicine. And I found that the majority of them were men over the age of 60. How was that?
Yeah, right. So is that something, again, that it's like we're remedying an issue that was perhaps created from a seemingly like dysfunctional, westernized, modernized culture, that any ancestral person or someone living a more ancestral life, would their levels of NO just be good? There'd be nothing to talk about with that. And I imagine that's also associated to like levels of everything else in the body. You can't isolate any one specific molecule or anything. But
yes, it's difficult to go back in time, but there are scientists who are really good at this. And we see that now, that the most primitive forms of life, even unicellular animals, tiny animals in the sea, every single animal that has ever been looked at, whether it's a mammal, a bird, an insect, whatever it is, every animal makes nitric oxide. That's what's incredible. So I mean, how can you conclude anything else but nitric oxide is required for life?
Yeah.
Every single organism makes nitric oxide. Bacteria make nitric oxide. They all make nitric oxide. And if I was younger and still had a functional lab, I would go after that a bit more and study that a bit more, because we might be able to understand how certain diseases develop or genetically develop, because there might have been decreases in nitric oxide as that species was evolving. There's so many unanswered questions.
Yeah. What's inspiring for you now then? If you're not younger and don't have a lab and you've got your Nobel Prize, you got the notoriety, what keeps you excited?
What I'm doing is I'm trying to make nitric oxide a household word, because it is so important for one's health, well-being, and lifestyle. And I can really summarize this very succinctly, and then you can ask me questions if you want. As I mentioned before, and there are books on this, and I'm going to be writing more, eating a healthy diet, in other words, healthy protein, low in saturated fat, low in salt, okay? Eating a healthy diet will boost nitric oxide production. Eating lots of fruits and vegetables with the richest sources of antioxidants. I always tell people the fruits and vegetables with the most intense color are the healthiest for you, and they are the biggest boosters of nitric oxide. That's been done in the lab. For example, pomegranate juice, that's a pretty intense red color. Did you ever stain your white undershirt with pomegranate?
Beet
you have
juice,
to throw it out.
Beet juice as well, right?
I was getting to that. That's exactly right. Beet juice as well. Popeye didn't know about nitric oxide 150 years ago. He ate lots of spinach. And of course, in those days, the commercialization of spinach was based on the fact that it was rich in iron. But now we know that spinach is rich in ingredients that boost nitric oxide production. So we've kind of rediscovered Popeye. So eating all the healthy foods and staying away from the bad foods, that's what I try to advocate. I'm going to there's no book written just about that. I'm working on that. In fact, it's called the miracle molecule of life. I'm about halfway through with it because I look at it as a miracle molecule.
Yeah.
Prevents stroke, prevents heart attack, allows you to have an erection. What the hell is more miraculous than that, for God's sakes?
When
And,
you
and it,
say when you say salt, do you mean like all forms of table salt, or is there such a difference as like say pink Himalayan salt, or is it, or is
yeah,
all salt created
it's
equal,
all
or
the
what?
same. It's all the same, but I want to clarify what I said. Of course, you should eat salt. I mean, I eat salt, and I happen, I like kosher salt. Pink Himalayan salt is great. There's a product with herbs and salt and sea salt. Sea salt, I like that. What I meant to say is that you don't want to eat excess salt. So
Yeah.
yes, it's okay to eat salt, but there are a lot of books written. You can Google all these things. What's the most what is the greatest amount of salt I should really eat every day and adhere by that. I see people when I go to a restaurant, when I used to go to a restaurant before the pandemic, I mean, nothing would turn me off more than I go in to have my breakfast, bacon and eggs. And then, bacon has lots of salt. I mean, it's loaded with salt. And I see these people just emptying all the salt, without even tasting it first and eating it. And I start to sweat because I know how unhealthy that is. So,
Yeah.
so you want to stay away from excess salt.
Yeah.
Sugar is good, but please stay away from excess sugar. Drinking a bottle or two of Coca-Cola every day or any other drink with salt, that's the worst thing you can do. There are other sugars that you can eat that are not sucrose, right? And that would not be dangerous to your health. So
Yeah.
you have to do things in moderation. Then I
Like,
hear people say, well, you shouldn't drink alcohol. That's not true. Alcohol is very helpful. Alcohol, as long as you're not an alcoholic, please. Alcohol can be very helpful. It can relax you. It can absolutely relax you and just settle your nerves. That can go a long way toward longevity. But most importantly, and I have to advocate, I mean, I don't have a vineyard and I don't make wine, but the alcohol I drink is wine. I like red wine. I like Italian red wine. Every night for dinner, I have 2 glasses. That's a half a bottle of red wine. And I'm doing fine. I've been doing that for years. Red wine is rich, very rich in antioxidants, and is one of several reasons why the Mediterranean diet has been so healthy.
yeah. Well, I mean, with this is the reason why I typically veer away from like nutritional conversations, because it's so slippery. When you say sugar, there's so many different varieties of sugar that one could consume. It could be processed
Yeah,
table sugar. It could be you're eating,
right.
sugar from like an apple where you have all the fiber and you're chewing and it's like this whole process, as opposed to
Yes,
like the
yes,
crack form of sugar that most of us are referring to when we say sugar. And then salt's the
right,
same
right.
conversation. It's not just,
Yeah.
the table salt that you might get in some shitty diner someplace is
Yes,
probably going to be different
yes.
than like Redmond sea salt or Redmond's what is it called, mine salt. It like comes from a mine.
Yeah, yeah,
And then
yeah.
within the salt conversation and the sugar and all that, it's like, what's your activity level?
It's
Are you did you sweat a gallon of sweat that day? Are you out in
right,
the middle of
right.
the desert? Then it's like, that's going to be vastly different. So for people listening, it's like, there's no one, from my perception of things, there's no one set recipe of this is what you do. It
It's
really depends on
it's
who you are, where you're at, and what you're doing.
no, I think you're right. I think everybody with salt should recognize, that salt is, no matter what kind of salt it is, it's the same thing. It's sodium chloride. I think everybody knows that. It's sodium chloride. Could be pink, it could be red, it could be from a mine, it could be this or that. But your body doesn't care where it's from, Aaron. Your body only cares if it's got a sodium ion and a chloride ion. It's sodium chloride. And if you're not sure, still, the best thing to do is eat your favorite salt, but minimize it. You know, you don't have to eat it to excess. That's the only thing I'm saying. I'm
Yeah.
not saying you should make a choice as to what kind of salt you have. I make choices, yes, but I just keep it down so
Yeah.
that I'm not taking it in excess. Because in America, and it's still true, Aaron, in America, the number one cause of hypertension is salt. And the number one cause of heart attack is hypertension.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
So,
about the so what about the person that gets, and we're like going to go into the weeds, but I want to talk about another thing in relation to like is there any psychosomatic relationships to the production of gases such as NO in the body? And like you already alluded to one being like wine, it relaxes the body. I think a big
yeah,
part of
you're
like the
right, right.
relaxation is like you're going through this ceremony. It's the end of the day. You've anchored that cup of wine to be this. For some other people might be smoking some pot. For some other people might be getting a massage. Some
Sure,
people might be
sure.
meditation or breath work or just taking a walk. You know, so
Exactly.
I wonder what the if there has been any research around the psychosomatic relationship to gaseous production in the body.
Yes.
So maybe we'll just do that. We'll stop talking about salt and sugar and all that
Okay. Yeah. No.
stuff.
Maybe I think you're right. There's been some research. There's been research, but sometimes it's difficult to evaluate. For
Yeah.
example, if you go for a walk and you're relaxing, it's making you think more clearly. You've got this fresh air, the birds singing. You feel great, and yes, you'll be making more nitric oxide. But what's causing the increase in nitric oxide? The only thing we know, and that's because we don't know that much, would
Yeah.
be the walking. The walking is the exercise. So
Mm,
you're moving your legs, you're pumping your arteries and veins. And whenever you do that, you make lots of nitric oxide. I didn't explain that earlier, which I should just touch on now because it's
please.
directly related. And that is that it's been shown about 20 years ago that the more you exercise, the more nitric oxide you make. This is so important to both people who work out and to people who lead a sedentary lifestyle. The most important stimulus in your body to make nitric oxide is exercise. Very simply explained, when you exercise, your heart beats faster and stronger. In other words, your cardiac output goes up, right?
Right.
When you pump the blood into your arteries, that force of the blood flowing through the arteries stimulates the endothelial cells to make huge amounts of nitric oxide. Well known
Mm,
fact. Okay, why do our bodies make all this nitric oxide when we're exercising? You don't have to be a scientist to figure that out. I mean, you want vasodilation and increased blood flow to your working skeletal muscles. So by making more NO, you dilate the arteries, you deliver more blood, therefore more oxygen and more nutrients to your working muscles. And by the same token, you're going to wash out more blood too. What goes in comes out. And the blood that comes out is going to remove lactic acid and other metabolites that give you and I pains in our muscles, me especially because I'm older, whenever I work out. And
yeah.
so it's just fabulous how exercise stimulates nitric oxide. And it's been known, you can look it up, it's been known for over 5,000 years that exercise is good for your health and increases longevity. But would you believe that we didn't know why till about 20 years ago?
Mm,
And now one of the answers, there's probably more, one of the answers is nitric oxide. The more you exercise, the more nitric oxide you make. That nitric oxide doesn't just go to the skeletal muscle, the nitric oxide is made in your entire body. It goes to your heart, it goes to your brain. And so by constantly making NO and getting it to your heart, you can prevent cardiovascular disease, prevent stroke and heart attack. Your brain makes more nitric oxide than does any other organ in the body. We still don't know why, but your brain needs lots of oxygen. It needs to get rid of the CO2, and the nitric oxide does other effects in the brain. It improves memory, learning, and information recall. So brain health is highly dependent upon nitric oxide. So those are all the details. And what it boils down to is exercise. Exercise is one of your favorite things. And believe it or not, it's one of my favorite things. The more we exercise, the more intense we exercise, the more nitric oxide you make throughout your body, the healthier this is for you, and it will increase longevity.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, I would redefine my kind of enamorment with exercise. I'm more just interested in general movement of the body, and that includes
Yeah.
movement of the senses. That includes like the eyes, for example. When you are really focused in on a cell phone or a computer screen, or you're more in that like myopic focus, there's
Yes.
a vasoconstriction, from my understanding, around the blood vessels and around the eye.
In the
And
eye,
so
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and so I think it's an interesting thing of how I'm kind of talking out my ass here right now. I'm kind of just like, some of this is
No.
a little bit of science, a little bit intuition, a little bit talking to other people. But when a relaxed, calm body that perhaps feels safe in the world, safe in their community, they feel like at
Yes.
home, they've won their own metaphoric Nobel Prize. They're finally
Yes.
like,
Yes.
oh, they
Yes.
have that exhalation that creates that spaciousness and that vasodilation in order for those endothelial cells to be able to produce
Yeah.
more NO.
That's
And then,
true.
but there's like an interesting like chicken or the egg feedback thing. It's like, okay, so the NO creates a vasodilation and thins the blood and gets all the blood circulating so it can create more of itself and open the spaces. But then
Yeah.
the opening of those spaces creates more NO. It's like,
Right.
which came first?
No, but we don't have to know what came first. All
Right.
we know is that it's a positive feedback phenomenon. It just keeps going like that. And then, as you talked about tensions, we don't understand too much about tensions and how being very nervous can cause a heart attack. Physicians used to say if you get nervous, you'll get a heart attack. And then for some reason, they all said, nah, that's not true. Well, that shows you they don't know what they're talking about. And they
Yeah.
means me too. I'm not just making fun of doctors. I
Yeah.
am one,
Oh,
But tension has been shown in humans and in various ways in laboratory animals to decrease nitric oxide production. Tension will do that. So if you're under tension for long periods of time every day, you're going to have a lower level of nitric oxide going forward.
mm,
And, psychiatrists are saying that, well, that's why it's a good idea to take antidepressants, because that removes the anxiety and it'll enable you, to make more nitric oxide. Maybe. I don't know. It's not been proven, but all we know is that it's best to avoid tension by whatever the mechanism. Forget about nitric oxide. It's good to avoid tension.
yeah.
And by doing that, that nitric oxide level will gradually restore itself.
Well, I think it's like somebody else had some, paraphrasing some quote that I heard recently on the podcast. An organism won't get well in the same environment that it got sick in. That's not exactly, but that's an interesting idea of like, when
Yeah. Well,
if you got sick in a certain way in a certain place, there's something about probably your relationship or your perception of the relationship, maybe the air that you're breathing, maybe their home, maybe there's mold in your house, maybe the food that's in your fridge,
sure.
maybe
Yeah.
environmental condition, like all these different variables that would form your organism into that expression of whatever symptom that comes out.
Oh,
And so if we have that temporary moment of, cool, I'm taking the NO, it's going in, hopefully that could create enough momentum to be able to get the person moving, to
yes.
reorient their environment, or perhaps maybe change environments entirely.
Yes.
What do you think
Yes.
about that?
Yeah. I think you're right. It's really funny. Ever since I got into this thing a few years ago with the nasal breathing,
Yeah.
when I get up in the morning, some people, when they get up in the morning, the first thing they do is light up a cigarette. Not a good idea. I don't smoke. But what I do is I sit on the edge of the bed. I close my mouth and I take about 20 deep breaths
Hmm.
through my nose and
Right.
exhale slowly through my mouth. I just do that 20 times. And then I get up, go to the bathroom, brush my teeth, and then hit the coffee, which I'm sorry, I'm a caffeine
I'm
addict.
drinking a cup right now. I'm with you,
Hey,
man. Let's
all right.
go. Yeah.
But that's what I do with the breathing. And once in a while, I catch myself. I do a lot of. I'm writing books. I evaluate papers for publication. I do a lot of, my professional work, and often I notice that I take shallow breaths,
Yeah.
sometimes through my mouth, or maybe I'm not taking deep breaths through my nose. I catch myself. And when I catch myself, I just stop, I lean back, and I take another 20 deep breaths through my nose. I mean deep breaths. And every time I do that, I feel great,
Yeah.
for the next 15, 20 minutes, half hour. So you really have to think about your breathing. You really have to take a time out, maybe every half hour, and think about your breathing.
Yeah. I think that we'll wrap up here soon because it's coming to the end of the hour. But I wonder your thoughts in relation to nitric oxide and cholesterol levels and even like plaquey buildups in arteries and such. Because
Sure.
I think there's an interesting movement related conversation there that exists as well. Perhaps the plaque is almost like a callus
Yeah, it
developing in
is.
certain
Sure.
places,
Sure.
and maybe there is some type of mechanical conversation there that's not just you're eating too much, bacon. And
Right. Right.
so I wonder if
Right.
there is like a gas conversation and a movement
Yeah.
conversation, and if there's other realms to it than just what goes into our face.
Correct. Let me try to explain. It was once thought, I think you remember this, it was once thought that if you ate too many eggs, especially egg yolk, which contains cholesterol, you would deposit cholesterol in your coronary arteries.
Yeah.
That's not true. There are people who are not prone to getting plaques in the arteries because they keep themselves healthy in a number of different ways. Those people can eat a dozen eggs a day for the rest of their lives and they'll live to 100. So
Sure.
it's not the cholesterol you eat, it's all the other things. As I said before, all the other things, and it boils down, you're going to accuse me of sticking with nitric oxide just because I invented it or discovered it. But remember, I got the Nobel Prize for it, so I can say what I want.
Hang
But
your hat.
the nitric oxide is what prevents the plaque from developing. When your endothelial cells are not making enough nitric oxide, the vessel wall becomes much more susceptible to attack by white blood cells, fat cells, and other cells, and they begin to deposit on the inner lining of the arteries, making plaques, which contain cholesterol. The more nitric oxide you're making, the less likely it is to develop those plaques. Statin drugs work by interfering with cholesterol metabolism. I think we all know that. But what most people don't know is that statin drugs stimulate the endothelial cells to make nitric oxide. And there's a group of cardiologists who feel that the most important effect of the statins is by increasing the nitric oxide. So it's good to eat. We don't have drugs yet that deliver nitric oxide to treat coronary artery disease. They're in the pipeline, I promise you, but they're not available yet. It's a very difficult chemistry to work with a gas like this. But if you eat healthy, if you eat as many antioxidants, as you can, if you eat pomegranate, if you eat blueberries, beets, if you do all that, if you exercise, at least 5 days a week, 40 minutes a day, the kind of exercise, that you do, is fine. You don't have to run a marathon, for God's sakes, or climb a bike up hills. It's just movement and concentration
And lifestyle.
and lifestyle and
Exercise, like
lifestyle.
the research that from NASA and all over the place. There's one called Joan Vernikos who'd probably really appreciate.
Yeah, yeah,
She
yeah,
studied
yeah.
astronauts, and I referenced this in the Align Method book. And she found that astronauts that would do small bouts of kind of like a CrossFit style, like high
Yeah,
intensity
yeah,
workout once a
right.
day, 5 days a
Yeah,
week, whatever it may be.
yeah, yeah.
They would end up going through this essentially like this rapid aging process, because the body is not built to do one big blowout with a whole rest of the day of just collapse and staring into my
That's so
notebook or
true.
my phone or my work or whatever it may be.
That
So if a person can start to, from, my lens, can start to integrate some of those basic principles that you get from, movement or fitness or just lifestyle. Look at any hunter gatherer tribe, look at any people in India or people in, any
Right.
place that people live in like somewhat more natural lifestyle. When they're waiting for a bus, they'll go into a squat. When they go back to their house, maybe they have like a low table and they'll eat
Sure.
food from the ground. And
Right.
so it's
Right.
like this,
Right.
that whole time that they're eating, hanging out, staring at their phone, they have this healthy buffer of, they happen to be changing their leg positions. Now they're twisted. Now maybe I'm laying on my side. They may have to
Sure.
walk more. Anyway, sorry, I'll shut up. But
No,
it's
no,
like,
no,
I
but
just want
all
to
that's
like
true.
the idea of
All that is true.
exercise. I want to make sure the exercise like can be who you are, as opposed to like
Yes.
this thing that you put into a bucket 5 days a week.
Right. Right. I agree. No, I think that's well said.
Sorry for yelling at you.
Oh,
I went on a rant. We'll do it again. But so that's sorry, I completely interrupted you because I was like
no, no,
wanting
no,
to
no.
to clear.
I think that you hear me always say that it boils down to nitric oxide, but until we have a better thing to hang our hat on, I think that thinking about nitric oxide is the way to go. And I always urge everyone knows how to use the Google search tool in a computer. It is so powerful. I use Google more than I use PubMed to look up medical literature. I mean, Google is very, very powerful. And start Googling nitric
Yeah,
oxide in exercise, nitric oxide in food, nitric oxide in longevity, and and then you make up your own mind. I mean, it's a voluminous amount of literature out there.
yeah. So finishing up for folks of bullet points, I guess. So
Sure.
getting nitric oxide, there's the nutritional approaches, but it sounds to me, and I think that I might be like overlaying more than, again, I'm talking out my ass. This is like a lot of this is just like intuition, but it seems like if the body can relax, if you feel like you're in a place where you can get a good breath and you can breathe all the way out and you can relax your eyes and you feel, like you take a while, do all those really simple things. It
Yeah.
seems like that sets the stage for your blood vessels, and you're not chronically held in tension, because mental tension equals physical tension.
Exactly. Of
Then all of a
course.
sudden, those endothelial cells and your arteries and blood vessels, they can start to also relax, and then all of a sudden your body comes in line and it starts to release all the gases, including
I mean,
nitric
that's
oxide.
exactly what you're saying is exactly true. And just imagine if you adapted that kind of lifestyle and also did some, more several days a week, a more vigorous exercise in addition to what you were
Yeah,
saying,
yeah, yeah,
and at all times try to eat a healthy, balanced diet together with all of that, and breathe properly all day long. Just think of how healthy everyone would be.
yeah. Yeah. So it's food stuff, breathing stuff. Are there any other things stand out of
And
like
exercise.
levers to pull? Exercise stuff, movement stuff.
Exercise. I think. Well, we didn't talk about, and I usually don't talk about, are there any nutritional supplements on
Sure.
the market that would be helpful? And, people ask me, they say, oh, professor, do you take all these different supplements? And I don't. There's so many out there. Many of them are great. 20 years ago, they were all terrible, but now many of them are great. Um, I don't believe in a multivitamin. I eat enough good food. I have all my vitamins. I take supplements when I know as a scientist that they boost the production of nitric oxide. So sorry, there I go again.
No,
I
that's
take
great.
I take amino acids like you can buy arginine and citrulline. Those two are what your endothelial cells use to make nitric oxide. So I take 5,000 milligrams of arginine every day, 1,000 milligrams of citrulline every day. I take vitamin C because vitamin C is the cheapest antioxidant you could buy. I also buy pomegranate extract. You can buy pomegranate extract in capsules.
Hmm.
So I'd rather take a capsule than eat 5 pomegranates, which has 2,000 calories.
Yeah.
So I'll take the extract, and fish oil, omega threes. Fish oil so important for all your cells making nitric oxide, and that's basically it.
And then there's also, I would imagine, there's probably some prevention of cognitive decline and dementia and things of the sort. And like there's like the lymphatic system, your brain's able to, like you have the lymphatic system, you also have this
Yes,
lymphatic system that's able to circulate all
yes,
that waste from the brain. So that the
exactly.
buildup of
Yes,
amyloid
yes,
beta plaque and all the things,
right.
very helpful
Yes,
to be able to circulate that, especially when you're sleeping. Um,
right.
I I wonder, I would imagine there has to be a pretty strong NO conversation in that as well, would be my guess. Do you know anything
Yes.
about that
Yeah. Oh,
relationship?
yeah. Yeah. I have some friends who are doing research in that area. In fact, there are two pharmaceutical companies trying desperately to develop drugs that actually have nitric oxide built into the drug molecule.
Mm,
And then when the drug gets in, the molecules get into the brain, it releases the nitric oxide where the amyloid, beta amyloid, builds up
mm,
for treating dementia and Alzheimer's disease.
wow.
They're working on that, no results yet. But the key I want everyone to remember, and I speak as a scientist here, your body makes nitric oxide, okay? Your brain makes 100-fold more nitric oxide than the rest of your body. Let me say that again. The brain makes 100 more nitric oxide, 100-fold more than the rest of your body. And we do not know why. We don't know why. Well, there's got to be a damn good reason why, even though we don't know it. Probably to protect the brain against blood clotting and stroke, probably to protect against these amyloid cells making all kinds of plaques, and also to improve memory and learning. When a child is born, the newborn has more nitric oxide in the brain at that stage of life than any other time in life. As soon as the child reaches 5 or 6 years old, the nitric oxide levels in the brain begin to decline. That probably has something to do with memory, learning, and information recall when
Mm,
you're that young.
mm.
And that's also why I can't learn any new language. I probably have very little nitric oxide in my brain.
Need more citrulline and
That's
arginine.
it. That's it. You got it.
Thanks so much for making time to do this, man. I really enjoyed getting to talk to you. I
the
so greatly appreciate your personality, how you have like a really beautiful youth to you, which is
Well,
great to be around.
I'm 79 years old. I'll be 80 next May.
That's
But you know,
great.
I try to stay young. I eat well. We do a lot of bicycling. I mean, very serious road biking, and you know, I just try to stay healthy. And like I said, you know, every few days I go and put my Nobel Prize in my hand, and I relax and I feel good.
what do you what do you attribute? I think your mindset is probably going to be one of the longest levers to your health and longevity. Do you attribute anything particular to the fact that you have such a mindset at almost 80 years old?
Well, I've always been like this. I've always been very inquisitive. I've always been highly motivated, and I've always had passion for anything I wanted to do, whether it's science or anything else. And like I said before, I have Italian genes. My parents were born in Italy, and I was born in the Italian neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York. So I'm very Italian. I just can't keep still. You know, what
Right.
can I tell you? But it's a happy movement. You know, I don't move around because I'm nervous or have any tension. I feel great, and
Yeah.
you know, and I move around. So I attribute it to that.
Do you have to leave right now? I'd be so curious to ask you a couple more questions if
No,
it's
I
okay. Is
don't.
that okay? Oh, good.
Yeah, I don't have to leave.
How the hell has the world changed since 80 years ago compared to today? What do you see in the world?
Oh my God, what a question that is. I mean, you know, the young people who I talk to, by young I mean 20 years of age or younger.
Yeah.
Here I am. Let me just tell you. Here I am in college. Okay, Columbia College in New York City. No such thing as a calculator of any kind. We
Right.
had to use something called a slide rule. Nobody knows what a slide rule is. In fact, they call it a slide ruler. You know, no one knows what that
Is
is.
that like an abacus?
Yeah, kind of, but a little bit more, a little bit more exacting than that. But
Yeah.
it's a fantastic way to make calculations. There was no electric typewriter. I remember when the first electric typewriter came out, it was called the Remington Quiet Writer. Aaron, you could hear it 1 block away. Okay, that was the quiet. And then there's no photocopy machine of any sort. I mean, if you have a book, you have pages, you can't, you take the book out of the library. I mean, you can't take the pages home. Many people used to tear the pages out in the library and then hide the book. I mean, how long does it take to write out all those pages? You couldn't do any of that.
By
There's
many
no
people, by many people, do you mean you?
right. There's no computer. No, I didn't tear the pages out.
You never tore the page?
No.
All right.
No
No
computers
discrimination.
whatsoever. No computer whatsoever. So no word processing, right? So if I had to type my thesis for my research, I'm typing my thesis, you're up to page 25, you're typing real carefully. All of a sudden you realize you left out a page or left out a paragraph.
Wow.
Uh-huh. Got to go back to the beginning, and where you left it out, you have to then type it in and type the rest of it over again.
What do you see
You
with?
were always graded by how neat the goddamn thesis was.
I feel like I'm addicted to my cell phone. It's something that I'm not really super excited
Oh.
about. And so with my kind of like loose, aimless time that will manifest itself inevitably, I'll just I'll feel this ghost hand reaching out to the phone and like checking
Yeah.
notifications.
Yeah.
Did
Well,
you, what was your version of some type of addictive distraction when you were in your like late teens, early 20s? Did that exist?
I mean, no, there was no. There was nothing. Well, let me tell you, I guess it's okay to say, I mean, my distraction, since there was nothing to do of that nature, I used to go after pretty girls.
Sure. Yeah, I
I
get
would,
that.
I'd ask my dad to buy me a good bike,
Yeah.
and then, take the girls. That's what we did. We took the girls for a ride on a bike, and, it was all about, and then I started to drive a car when I was a senior in high school, and it was all about, driving, having your friends. I mean, you're addicted to going to parties,
Yeah.
going to proms, no electronic gadgets, nothing. I had my first cell phone just after it was developed, just after I got my Nobel Prize in 1998. They
Hmm.
were just developing it because there were big ones. They were not cell phones. They were like box phones. And, I did, why would I need that? But then after the Nobel Prize, I was traveling a lot, and it would be good to have a cell phone. And then finally, they started to develop the smaller ones, and I had my first cell phone, I guess in 98 and 99. And I can tell you that I have certainly become addicted to that.
Yeah. Did you
My,
use any psychedelics during like the 60s and 70s and the whole like kind of hippie San Francisco revolution stuff?
No, during that time I was not in San Francisco. I was, as I said, I was doing my science, my dissertation, and starting my early career. And luckily, I was doing my career is in pharmacology, which is the study of the effects of drugs on the body and the
Mhm.
effects of the body on drugs. And so you get to know all of the good effects and bad effects and this effect and that effect of all the chemicals and drugs. And so one is sort of like afraid to take some of these drugs.
You never tried
You
any
know,
kind of
well,
psychoactive anything in your life?
yes, twice. Let me tell you two. These are true stories. These are
Okay.
true stories. And if you don't believe me, I'll set you up with a
All right.
Zoom call
All
with
right.
two people so you can discuss it.
Okay.
For years, well, let me tell you the easy one first. My graduate students and postdocs invited me over, and I smell all this pot. I always loved the smell of pot. I was not a smoker. And they
Beautiful. Yeah.
said, well, why don't you try this? So I tried it, and I coughed, because I don't smoke. And they said, just inhale it, slowly, just sit back and relax. And so I smoked it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, nothing happened. I didn't feel anything. And so I did another one. And then I was going after my third one, and one of my graduate students, her name was Stella Check, I remember. She says, Dr. Ignarro, give me that. No. Pot, cannabis has a way of building up in the body, and you don't want to keep smoking like this because you're going to die of a headache tonight. I think I had 5 of them, and when I got home, I felt like I was on Mars somewhere. I mean, I was really affected by that, and I never had another one again. Sorry.
Cannabis is a vasodilator, so it's helpful with healing injuries and such, especially like joint issues.
Now I know that. Now I know that. My wife's a physician. She knows that.
Yeah.
We also know that cannabis, THC, can increase nitric oxide.
If it dilates, then it'll increase NO. Yeah.
So lately I've been asking
Same team.
Same thing. So I've been asking my wife, now that we know all these things about THC, and now that it's legal in California, let's go buy some and try it and relax. She goes, no, never.
Well, yeah.
And the other example was quite dangerous. Cannabis, smoking pot is very healthy. There's nothing unsafe about that.
Yeah.
Cocaine is a different story. Cocaine,
I agree.
You don't do that right, it's dangerous. So one of my friends, he was another scientist. This was many years ago, in the early 70s. So he comes over to my house. I was single, and we were going to go and have a drink, one of the clubs. So he opens up something, and I had a glass table. So he sprinkles this white powder, I'm naive, on the table. He has like a blade, and he puts it into a line, and then he gets a straw, and he goes, snuffs it up. He says, Lou, you got to try this. I said, is that cocaine? He said, yeah. He said, I'll just give you a little bit. Just try it. And I figured, what the hell? You try it once. I mean, I'll try a little bit. Yeah. But he warned me. He says, when you do it, be sure to breathe it in very, very forcefully through your nose and get it into your lungs. Don't breathe it in gently and get it in your throat. Well, right. I guess I was afraid to breathe it in too strongly, so I breathed it in less strongly. It deposited in my throat, and cocaine is a local anesthetic. Yep. So what that means is that I couldn't swallow. I lost my swallowing reflex. I got scared. I started to sweat.
Oh, no.
Breathing heavily, and his name was Howard. I won't tell you his last name.
Sure.
He comes down, he puts me on the floor, he grabs me by my collars and said, "Don't you do this to me, you son of a bitch. Don't you do this to me." And then he's patting me. and I finally came out of it. He says, "I told you to breathe it in rapidly." I said, "I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm okay now. Let's go get a drink."
Well, that's the same.
True stories.
That's the same conversation as the sugar. Like cocaine, essentially, is like the processed white sugar of the fruit world. Like the coca leaf itself is fantastic. It's helpful with acclimatization. It's helpful with the production of nitric oxide.
Yeah.
So it's like the leaf itself is quite fine. It's when it gets into the whole process with the gasoline and the kerosene, and that's when it comes out to being this hyper concentrated form of the original really healthy plant. And so once again, like even within that, I think there's nuances to all the conversation. So I think a person can be like sugar bad, or salt or coca leaf, for example, but it's like or marijuana. But I think if we do wind it back and kind of get closer to like the natural form of a thing, I don't think nature has that many traps for us.
No, I think you're right. So, I've been, I took the cocaine once. I tried the pot actually twice, but I do have drugs. My 2 drugs are sissy drugs. They're caffeine and wine.
Yeah, of course.
Caffeine and alcohol. I don't take anything else. I feel great. I don't feel like I have to. I don't have a desire to experience, psychedelic drugs. But I love the effect of the little bit of red wine that I drink every night. It feels good. I don't do it during the day. I do it at night. Relax a little bit. Yeah. Nothing like relaxation. Then you go to bed. Wake up, and then you have caffeine.
Yeah.
Directing it the other way, but I feel good.
Yeah, I'm with that. Thanks so much for making time having this conversation. I really appreciate getting to talk. I feel
Well,
like
thank,
I feel like yeah, this has been a really like I mentioned, I've been talking about nitric oxide, not a ton, but you know, a reasonable amount for the last couple years, and
good, good, good.
you've really uh, gone much deeper into a lot of questions that I've kind of been having looming. So I appreciate it.
Sure. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Anytime you need more,
Yeah. Well,
just let me
if you're
know.
doing a book, let me know. I'd love to have you back
Oh,
and
oh,
help
I
promote
will.
that.
No, I will.
That'd be really great.
Thank you. I will definitely let you know. And it's been a pleasure working with you, Aaron. Thank you
Yeah.
very much
Where
for
should
this
people go to
opportunity.
learn more about you? I know you already have a book. I know you have. So what's the best? Where do people learn more? I'd love for people to be able to go deeper into your
Well,
stuff.
I wrote one book a number of years ago called No More Heart Disease,
Yeah.
and the No stands for nitric oxide. And there's still many copies available on Amazon. That's the best way to go. And
Cool.
I'm working on one that I'll be publishing soon. It's going to be called Dr. No, N-O, for nitric oxide.
Right.
And I'll keep you informed. But, you know, they can Google my name. You can Google Dr. Lou Ignarro, and then it'll show you my Facebook, Instagram. They can go to those sites. So
Cool.
they'll find me. I'm in more places that I'd like to be, believe me.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you so much for
All
making
right.
time. And we're in the same place. I'm going to be here for another little bit. I will see where the heck I'm at this winter, but we're in next time. Hopefully we can do this in person.
Okay. Yes, absolutely right.
Yeah. All
All
right.
right.
Cool.
Great. All right. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, man.
Take care.
See you, man. Bye.
Hey.
Bye now.
All right. Bye
Bye.
bye now. Take care.